Segments from Life in the Arts can now be viewed on demand on YouTube.com. Just go to YouTube.com, add /Longtimers, and that will take you to our YouTube channel. Welcome to another edition of Life in the Arts Classic Light, the art enrichment program featuring art lessons, virtual field trips, artists from the past, student films, and performing artists. On today's show, our favorite art teacher, Laurie Myers, presents a lesson on Picasso, Cubism, and the art of collage. And now, here's Laurie Myers.
Welcome to Life in the Arts. My name is Laurie Myers, and today we're going to be studying about Picasso. Pablo Picasso was a great artist at a very, very young age. He was about 9 when he started, and his friends would say, "You know what? Look across the room. Draw that guy from the toe up." And he was actually able to do it. He was a wonderful draftsman. His father was an art teacher and a museum curator, and gave up all his art supplies when Pablo was about 13 and said, "You know what, son, you are going to far surpass me as a great artist, so here are all my things I'm giving up because you're going to be the master." And it was true. Pablo Picasso was. He really, really wanted to go to Paris. All the artists were going to Paris and going to school there. So finally he convinced his parents that that would be okay, and off to Paris he went. But he looked at the poverty in Paris, and he had never experienced anything like that. And so everything that he painted in the beginning of his career in Paris was blue, and it is called the Blue Period. Then he met a bunch of circus people. And we don't look at circus people now maybe in the same way, but the circus people in France at that time were very, very great entertainers and very, very popular. So Pablo Picasso, wanting to become famous himself, thought, well, if I stay with these guys, then maybe I'll become famous. And so everything in that period was done in rose color or pink. And you can look through his works and really tell where he was at one particular time or another. After his blue and rose period, he decided to go into something called Cubism. And he really was a master, and we know him best for his Cubist approach. Today, we're going to do a Cubist collage. Now, Picasso, in his Cubism, a cube, of course, is a square that has three-dimensional quality to it, but he wanted to show all sides at once. So we're dealing with a two-dimensional space, which is the paper, the paper plane. But he wanted to show you the top of it, the side of it, underneath it, maybe what was inside of it, all at one time. And that was really what Cubism was all about. Georges Braque was a good friend of Pablo Picasso's, and they got together and did lots and lots of collages. And really, Picasso was the first collage artist. Now, the word collage comes from the words papier-collé, or glued paper. And so we're going to cut lots of different pieces of paper out today and glue them onto our base piece of paper, okay? So this is one that I did, and it's in my book, and yours is going to be just as great as this, probably better. I love when the kids do this project. We're first going to start out with a piece of tagboard, or a thicker piece, because we're going to place lots of pieces on top of it, so we want it to have a little weight. And I want to show you a whole group of different colors and different textures of paper. This is a paper bag. This is a little piece of handmade, kind of natural recycled paper. These are all just construction paper. This is a little bit of pastel paper that is a little bit thicker, and these both are also construction paper. I also have some pieces from magazines, and you can see this is a sofa, a picture of a sofa, but we'll cut it out because this sofa has wonderful different lights and darks and different textures. If you'll notice, All of these are in the same color range. They're all neutrals. And Picasso, after the two different periods of blue and rose, he went to kind of a neutral palette or a neutral color scheme, which incorporated all these. Now, he was really, really interested in guitar music and bowls of fruit and still life. And so within his very wild, kind of almost abstract cubism, he would take certain little shapes that gave you a suggestion of something. So I call this particular piece of artwork Music, 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 because I want music to be your theme. How does music make you feel? How about when you turn the radio on and you hear a song that you really love? Okay, I know, I love that too. And what does sound look like? I mean, is it big, bold splashes of color? Is it tiny bits of paper that are just bursting out of a trumpet? Does it make waves? Does it repeat line? Yes, you want rhythm and movement in this. And the way to create that is to bring diagonals and horizontals and make them kind of clash against each other, move them off the paper a little bit, repeat a line 3 or more times, and that repetition creates movement in art, okay? What is your favorite instrument? Do you play an instrument? You might want to copy that instrument and cut that out. You can rip the paper, you can cut the paper. I just want to show you what happens when you take and you move these different colors and different textures around, and how you can create a really good collage. Picasso was a master at this. And after he did his collages and became very, very famous in his own lifetime, he was very egotistical. He felt really good about himself, and he actually made himself into almost a movie star type guy. And most artists didn't do that, but Picasso had a big ego. When he painted pictures of his friends, he made them ugly. When he painted pictures of himself, he made him much more handsome than he actually was. And so that was kind of a funny part of his personality, but he did become very famous in his lifetime. And towards the end of his life, he actually lived just like a movie star behind locked gates with security guards, and he was very famous. As his work progressed, and the older and older he got, the more simplified he made his shapes and made his drawings. And so that was interesting. In the very beginning of his art career, he painted like one of the old masters with the old techniques, the traditional composition, and as he moved forward, his artwork got just a lot more crazy and a lot more wild. So right now, I want you to be real bold in your expression of music, and maybe you can experience a little bit of that Picasso-like passion, because he didn't paint weak paintings. They were bold and dramatic. So I'm like guitars, and so I'm going to take this guitar. I think maybe I'll turn the paper this way, but who knows which way we're going to have it in the end, because paintings read in a certain way. We read from left to right. So you want your painting to read from left to right like we read, and you want to move the person around, the viewer around, so they're kind of stuck in there, but they also have a little bit of a way out. That's real important in art. You want to draw them in. You don't want them off looking at somebody else's artwork. You want them looking at your stuff. Okay, so there's some tricks that I'll teach you so that you can do that. So we're going to first start out with this little shape of a guitar. If you want it to be exactly the same on both sides, you can do this folding method like you've probably done when you've drawn a heart or something for a little card. And you can just draw half of the shape and then cut it on that line. Don't cut on the fold, cut it on this line, and then of course it'll turn out exactly the same on both sides. I'm not going to use this one, but I'll just show you how, because this is great. This is when you want a shape to be totally symmetrical, so this works for butterflies and hearts and vases and things that you want that are exactly the same on both sides. See how that works out? Okay, but I have a big one right here. And actually, it doesn't matter today whether your drawing is just perfect or you have a perfect shape. If it's a little distorted, it'll actually probably be better. Now, here's my big sofa. Odd thing. But maybe I'm going to take a little bit of this sofa and cut out a little bit of this line. And let's see. Maybe I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And this is just going to go on the top of my guitar. Okay, right like that. That maybe is interesting. Okay, and I have some other pieces that I've cut out from magazines. So when you are looking for supplies for this project, you can look in magazines for neutral colors. And you're not going to use the actual real object. I'm not going to just put the sofa on the paper. That wouldn't look interesting. But maybe this diagonal coming out of here, maybe it'll make it look like it's music that's coming out. We'll just play with it. And I have a paper bag here too. So I want the different textures. And I don't want all the paper to be exactly the same thickness. And let's see what happens if we just put this over. I'll glue this down in a minute. Maybe I'll stick that underneath. I kind of like that. Like that. And also, you can make strings. Now I've taken tissue paper and I've just cut it up into long pieces like this. And you can take one end and you can twist these so that if you wanted to make strings on the guitar, but that's almost too literal for me. It almost tells the story too much. So I'm going to see what these black lines look like if I just put them down here at the bottom. Because remember I told you about creating repetition and movement? So if I have 3 little lines right there, that kind of will give me the feeling of music, actually printed music that you could work off. You could do piano keys, you could do, any type of musical instrument you wanted to. Now I cut this one out and it might be interesting to kind of have this follow this one. It might be too much the same size. Oh, I like it like that. Okay. So as you're doing this, I want you to look at how the different colors, they're close to the same color, but there's lots of different values of the same color. Now value is an important key in art. Value is the intensity or how much light or darkness, lightness or darkness a color has. So even though these are all in the same family, they're different values, and that creates kind of a sophisticated piece of artwork without doing too much at all. Now, if you've got lots of little pieces, sometimes kids will take and they'll cut up a whole bunch of little pieces and they won't kind of go together, they won't connect, it doesn't make a good composition. So I want you to see what happens if I take and put a block of color behind it. The other thing that you want to try to stay away from is having everything exactly the same size. Okay, size really is important in this, in that you change, you have some big, some medium, some small. If they're all tiny, we kind of have a relative size that we draw everything in and that we paint everything in and we cut everything in. But if you can change that, I don't care whether you're painting or drawing, watercolor, collage, if you can change the size around the paintings, you will have a better composition. So let's see what happens if I stick that block of color in behind. Does that work? That kind of looks good. Okay, now I cut this bowl out of this wonderful ad that just had like pieces of fabric. And we're going to make our music come right out of this bowl. I'll see what happens with these black lines. I might have to change them somewhere else. Maybe they're going on the top now. Okay, so you're going to cut out lots of different pieces, lots of different shapes. Musical notes would be great. Little bits of paper would be great. If you don't want to cut it all, you can definitely tear the paper because you can do a torn paper collage. Let's take this color and just tear off a piece and see what happens. I think I'm going to tear this just into kind of an interesting shape and see whether this works. I don't want any edges that are not torn, that have the straight edge. I could just do kind of a Y here. See what happens with that Y. Maybe I'll stick that right in there. Okay, that kind of gives me another texture. Okay, so if we'll look at this again, there are lots of pieces that move around. This brings you in. These three straight lines bring you in. This line drops you down. This bowl right here kind of keeps you in the work, and this black line that's on the edge of this other guitar or violin, this little black line down here kind of stops you and moves you back up this curve. The one thing I don't want to see is I don't want to see any pencil lines on this. I want you to represent everything that you're doing through paper. Okay, so I have to see whether I like this. Do I want to move that up there? Okay, and maybe I'll have a circle in the center of my guitar here. Here's another little piece of paper. If you can get some printed music on a neutral color, you can just take like a beige piece of paper and on the copier just print off some color. And that works. I don't think I like the torn piece. It kind of looks messy in there. I've got this crazy head of this person. Maybe I'll make them just coming and looking out a bit. This can go over the top. Okay, so you can create it any way you want. There's no right or wrong answer to this particular art project. You can be as bold and crazy, even if you just wanted to take bits of paper like this and put them around. They might work better than the one I actually tried to tear into the right piece. But think about the blocks of color behind. Let's say you ended up with a whole bunch of little pieces that were like that. Those won't connect. So these big blocks of color behind them make them connect. Maybe we need a black stripe or a black box. Okay, so maybe I'll just take and make a little black box and see what happens. And it doesn't matter whether it's perfectly shaped black box. It's actually better if it's not. Does that lead you in at all? Or is that too strong? Too much black at the top, maybe? Maybe a black thing down here, maybe right here with that little torn piece on it. Okay, once I get my whole design worked out like this, then I'm going to take glue. I'm not going to take this off of this paper because I guarantee you it will never get back the same way. And I've had kids say, oh yeah, I know exactly how I like it, whoosh, off to the side, and they think they're going to pick up every paper and get it back. And it's happened to me. It doesn't come back exactly the same way. So the easiest way is to take the undermost piece, and did I use a lot of glue? No, I didn't. I'm just putting a few little dots of glue on my pieces, and I'll just carefully lay them down. It's kind of hard to keep the whole thing just right, but I definitely don't want you to move your design off. But I also don't want you to start gluing right away because you never know. You saw how I changed it and moved things around. If I had started gluing from the very beginning, it wouldn't, I wouldn't have had that option of moving the stuff around. So very carefully. Those little lines, I probably can get them back to about the same place. But you see how the blocks of color make the other colors stand out, even though these are all neutrals. We don't have any blues or greens or reds in here. We have all these kind of neutral brownie tones. Okay? So this is what I really want you to do, is not use too much glue, because then we'll make it a big mess. And you want to try to make this as professional looking as you can. So just a bit of glue here and there. you don't want any of the little tips coming up. So you see how this is kind of coming up? You want to try to get it flat. If you have to take a little glue, stick it on your finger, get that glued down flat. That's important. Okay, now I got to do these pieces. I think I'll move those off just a little bit. Okay, and notice I put that a little bit off center. This is cubism. We're trying to give it almost an abstract feel. Abstract is where it's non-representational, but this is not totally abstract because we are representing musical instruments and musical notes and actual music. So there we go. Now these are a little bit more difficult, but if you just put a little line of glue on them and just carefully lay them down, you got to be careful, but just a little dab of glue, not too much. And the tissue paper has a tendency to bleed, so the color. So once you get it on there and get it setting down, this one's going to give me trouble, isn't it? Sometimes this happens with the kids, and we have to kind of hold them down together. But notice those aren't all exactly the same length and size. These are my little torn pieces. So I want to move you down this way, move you this way, and these little torn pieces are effective now because they kind of move you back up into the painting. My little head here is not on. Let's stick him down in there. But we don't want to just cut things out that say, okay, this is a head, this is a sofa, this is a bottle, and stick those things on. That's an okay kind of collage, but it doesn't have that Picasso-ness to it. By cutting things out and just getting the textures and look at this wonderful dark line. I could put this somewhere. I don't think this one needs it, but I have these available for me. I went through lots of magazines to try to find different colors and different shapes. Here's a little triangle that could go in somewhere, but I don't want to overdo it. I think this is enough right here. Okay, so remember all the different textures that you can find in paper and in tissue and twisting the tissue. You could use raffia in it, which would create another texture. You could use sandpaper in it. I've never done that, but you could actually cut some sandpaper, and that all gives you a wonderful texture to it. And collage is designed to have almost that three-dimensional, I want to touch you feeling. You don't want people to touch your artwork because they'll wreck it and get their hands on it. Oh, I didn't glue these. And you don't want it actually jumping off the page like curly cues because those usually get lost. Somebody comes along and says, oh, wow, that looks like I could play with it. And you don't necessarily want that to happen either. But this does have texture. It has a almost 3D quality to it. And in the layering of the colors, you get more of a 3D or cubist type of view too. Now, I've made this, it's music, it's a representation of guitars and bowls of fruit and just colors that move around. And hopefully, I've led your eye around the page. One of the tricks on leading the eye around the page is to use color 3 times. I maybe could use a little black something right there because I've got it here, I've got it here. I'm afraid if I did a black dot or something right there, it'd be too redundant, and I think it's okay. But if you're doing it and you feel like you need to jump around, I want you to add something. I want you to look and say, okay, I think maybe it needs something right there. Now, the other trick with this is you saw me do it this way, but does the painting actually read better like this? I don't think so, but sometimes it can. Is it better upside down, where the guitar is coming down like this? Does it read better like this, where it actually almost looks like a landscape with these mountains in the background and the horizon line of the guitar? Or does it read better like this? I think I kind of like it like this. But in this type of artwork, you need to turn it all the way around. Take a look at it, see which ways that it reads. Because remember, we read from left to right, and you want to work the viewer around the paper. You want to draw them in. Okay, that's what Picasso was really, really good at. I think he died when he was 91, could be 93, I can't remember. But he was very, very famous and produced lots and lots of artwork. He did, I think, over 9,000 pieces of actual signed art. He did pottery, he did sculpture, he did the collages, he did oil paintings. He did little crayon drawings. He did a little crayon drawing that I saw in a catalog that was $50,000 at Sotheby's auction house. So you too can become very famous if you really follow your passion in art and really follow your dream like Picasso did. He went by the rules at first, and then he broke all the rules of art and really showed us the passionate side of his nature. Thanks.
I think Picasso's major accomplishment was going beyond being satisfied with being good. He was a very good representational artist, and he could have stopped right there. People admired his work, he was technically accurate, and he was respected. But he knew there was something else different in him that was burning to come out. And he struggled, and he went beyond the fact that he got ridiculed and made some people very angry and upset with his new art, but he basically opened up doors for all of modern art by being so strong and by listening to the voice that was inside him.
And some of his work looks childlike, and so I think that a lot of people who look at artwork think everything has to look like it does in nature, and they don't think about the response to life or some object that you have that is something other than what it looks like.
Picasso, for me, is always about drawing. He's the one for me that always talks the graphic side of things, and the plastic in and outness of art, and the vitality. And he is the voice of the 20th century. And as we enter the 21st century, it'll be interesting to see how that voice carries over into...
Guernica was the story of this town that was bombed by mistake, and the atrocities that happened in that town, and especially the horse's face. It was just so moving. It was incredible. And I saw the painting in person in the Sofia Gallery in Madrid, Spain. And that painting, I'd say Guernica inspired me to put pathos in my work.
Fame kind of ate him up, kind of like Marlon Brando used to be like a great actor, and then he became this huge screen star. And I think that happened to Picasso. I think the fame just kind of ate him up. And if you look at his earlier work, I find it much better than the later work, because the later work, there's not as much ground, there's not as much substance, stuff to it. It's more about fame, and selling. Picasso. Thank you.